If you're clenching your buttholes from the title alone, just listen. This isn't about pro-life or pro-left. I'm not here to defend Republicans or Democrats. If you're a diehard for either side, respectfully, this might piss you off. This is about how the media controls us, not who you voted for. Okay, now breathe. Everyone, unclench. Take a breath. You're not under attack. Nobody's canceling you. This isn't a debate, and there's no quiz at the end. If you're already feeling defensive, that's kind of the point. Why everyone feels like they're losing their mind. Be honest with yourself for a second, okay? Do you feel like everyone is insane? Everything is on fire, and somehow you're supposed to have a strong opinion about it immediately? Every week, it's like, this is the most important issue of your lifetime. And then the next week, it's again, this is the most important issue of your lifetime. At this point, you guys, we've had about 47 once-in-a-lifetime generational cases. Okay? Statistically, this is super impressive. Yet, you guys, nothing ever feels finished. Nothing ever gets resolved that we hear about. You're just mad, tired, and vaguely afraid all of the time. That's not because you're weak. It's because you're being marinated. The modern media is not an information system. It's an emotional buffet. You don't go there to learn anything. You go there to feel something. Angry? There's content for that. Scared? Oh, buddy, we got a whole section for you. Sad? But morally superior? Chef's kiss. This is premium content. Calm? You want calm? We don't serve that here. Calm people do not share. Calm people do not click. Calm people do not scream at people like a keyboard warrior at 2 a.m. Why nothing ever ends. Have you ever noticed that no story actually ever ends? There's no, and that's the conclusion. It's just more updates coming soon. New developments. This changes everything. Why this information matters. Matters to what? My fucking blood pressure? Closure is freaking bad for business. The second you feel like, oh, okay, I understand this now, the dopamine has stopped. No bueno. So instead, you live in a constant state of thinking, wait, what happened with that? Did that ever get resolved? Or you simply just forgot? Exactly. But I'm not like that. At this point, some of you are thinking, okay, but this is about other people. I'm not like that. I see through the media. Am I right? Congratulations, you are the final boss. Here is the uncomfortable part. Even if you don't trust the media, they still choose what pops up in your algorithm. You might hate watch, you might hate share, you might even mock it, but you're still reacting. You're not outside the system. You're just arguing behind it. Let's set up this iceberg for you guys, okay? So here's what we're doing. We're using an iceberg for a number of things. One, it's visual. Two, everyone understands it. I want you guys to understand everything I tell you today. And three, it perfectly explains how deep this rabbit hole really goes with visuals. So at the top, we'll have the obvious stuff. For those who have never seen an iceberg video, okay? At the top, we'll have the obvious stuff. The stuff everybody jokes about, the stuff people admit at parties. The deeper we go, the less funny it gets. Not because it's a secret, but because it forces you to admit something really annoying, which is this. It controls you by deciding what you see, how you feel about it, and when you are done caring. Okay? We all on board here? So let's start easy, super easy. No politics yet, no examples yet, no sacred cows harmed yet. I'm just kidding. We're not doing any of that. We're not doing any of that here. Just the one thing that everyone agrees on, even if they don't realize how much damage it does. The 24-hour news cycle. Why is everything urgent? Why nothing ever resets? And why are we constantly being stimulated? It's the fastest way to make sure nobody slows down and nobody thinks. Strap in, bitches. It might get a little bumpy. The 24-hour news cycle. Why everything is urgent and nothing matters. Welcome to permanent emergency mode. Spear fingers. Let's talk about the 24-hour news cycle. The thing literally everybody pretends is normal now. At some point, we all just agreed. The world is always ending. Someone is always outraged. And you're supposed to care immediately. There is no slow news days ever. That concept is dead, buried, moited, muck ducked. Everything is breaking. Everything is developing. If the asteroid isn't hitting today, it's being very closely monitored. Breaking news doesn't mean anything anymore. Remember when breaking news actually meant something? It's kind of hard to remember. Like, hey, stop what you're doing. Something genuinely important just happened. Now it just means, please, don't close the app. I'm here to tell you something, to stress you out. You need to be stressed out. Breaking news used to interrupt programming. Now it's the entire programming. You could stub your toe right now, and somewhere an anchor would be like, breaking news, Americans next. Woman stubs her toe. Will this be fatal? Could this take her life? Knowing damn well it's just a stubbed toe. It happens all the time. But the banner stays red all the time so that your nervous system never calms the F down. And when you're always on high alert, your blood pressure is high, your nervous system is on fudge and fire, you can never stop and think clearly. Why is urgency so addictive? Here's the trick. Urgency feels like importance. When something feels urgent, your brain immediately triggers. This must matter. This must matter. Even if it doesn't affect your life, even if this won't matter next week, even if you can't do a thing about it. Urgency hijacks your logic response. It keeps you alert. It keeps you anxious. It keeps you emotionally available, which is great if your job is to keep people watching ads to make you money. The 24-hour cycle keeps you in this trap in what I like to call the never-ending now. There's no past, there's no future, there's literally just right now. No context, no history. There's literally no, hey, have we seen this before? Because history always repeats itself. And we just don't see it. Every single story is treated like this is going to change everything. And when everything changes every day, nothing actually changes. Nothing. You're emotionally sprinting in place. Have you noticed that stories just never end anymore? There's no, oh, and here's what ended up happening. It's always more updates coming soon. We're following this closely. Here's what we know so far. Tune in next week for possible updates. Forever and ever and ever and ever. The moment a story ends, it stops producing emotion. And emotion is the product, you guys. Closure is boring. Resolution is boring. Real answers are always snooze fest. Always. Questions? Questions always keep you hooked. But are we asking them? The news gives you emotional whiplash. It gives it to us all. 1 hour, you're supposed to be furious, full of rage. The next hour, terrified, shaking in your boots. Then sad, then hopeful, then outraged again. There's no recovery time. Imagine doing that to your body physically. Sprint, stop, panic, relax, sprint, stop, wait, sprint, stop. You'd collapse. But mentally, the mental freaking gymnastics, we just label that as being informed. Why you feel exhausted all the time. This is why everyone feels burnt out. It's not just work, you guys. It's not just social media. It's because your emotional energy is being spent on a few things. Things you can't control, things you can't influence, things that disappear before changes even occur. You're constantly reacting, but never resolving. That's erosion. It's a ticking time bomb. Here's the part that really messes with people. Being constantly updated makes you feel informed, makes you feel important, aware, like you're on top of things. But awareness without context is not wisdom, it's noise. And noise is so easy to control. The 24-hour news cycle is the foundation. Everything else sits on top of it. It trains you to react quickly, feel deeply, and forget fast. Once you have accepted permanent urgency as normal, it becomes very, very easy to decide what stories get oxygen, what stories get buried, and what emotions you will associate with each and every one. And this is where things start to get a little interesting, a little fishy, a little fun. Now that we have established how the machine keeps you constantly stimulating, there's only one obvious question that's next. Who decides what stories get attention? Why does one event dominate the entire country, while others with the same context barely make a headline? Here's the next layer of the iceberg. Selective coverage and why some stories explode and others vanish. Some stories become national trauma. Others disappear without a trace. Once you see how this works, you can't unsee it. They choose what you see. The illusion of the news. We talk about the news like it's a thing, like it's neutral, like it's just what happened today. But the news isn't reality. It's a freaking highlight reel. Out of the thousands of things that happen every single day, only a handful make it to your screen. That's where the real power is, you guys. The media doesn't tell you what you need to think. It just needs to decide what topics are worth your attention. That's it. That's literally it. If a story is everywhere, if you're seeing it everywhere, your brain immediately notifies, hey, this is important. I need to look into this. If it's nowhere, your brain just assumes, it's not important. I don't care. Nobody cares. Why should I care? No lie required. Just repetition or complete silence. Easy peasy. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Easy. Why one story becomes the moment. Sometimes something happens and it becomes the story. Wall-to-wall coverage. Around-the-clock discussion. Panels, experts, thinking pieces, reaction videos, memorials. It feels like the entire country has just stopped. Came to a halt. And other times, something just as tragic has happened and you barely hear about it, if you even do hear about it. Maybe a headline, maybe a tweet, maybe literally nothing. Is it even called a tweet anymore? I don't know. effing care. You know what I'm saying. The difference isn't the severity, you guys. It's the usefulness. What are we trying to distract you from? The media doesn't just report things. It turns some things into symbols. A symbol is powerful. A symbol is emotional. It carries a narrative and it carries meaning beyond the event itself. Statistics don't do that. Nobody gives a shit about statistics for some weird ass reason. Statistics are boring. They don't rally people. They don't trend. So some tragedies become symbols and others stay numbers. And once something becomes a symbol, it gets infinite coverage. Infinite. Here's the weird point, you guys. Coverage doesn't reflect public interest. It creates it. The more something is covered, the more people talk about it. The more people talk about it, the more coverage it gets. Feedback loop. At that point, the story isn't just being reported. It's being maintained.
Well, you got him down, man. Let him breathe, least, man. I can't breathe. I've been trying to help out. So I breathe.
A clear example of this is George Floyd. And before you guys lose your shit just because I said that name, hear me the fuck out. Because like I said, this isn't about either side. This is about understanding. Okay? Let's continue. His death became more than a news story. It became a national symbol, a global movement, a cultural resist. And to be clear, this isn't about minimizing what had happened. This is about asking a question that people get really uncomfortable with. Why this case? Why did this become the moment that froze the entire country in place? Why this footage? Why this narrative? Why this exact timing? Because similar tragedies, you guys, happened before this, and they again happened after this, but they didn't receive the same treatment. The coverage turned this event into history and let the other ones just disappear. Once you understand this, you start to notice something really disturbing. The media doesn't just decide what you see. It decides what you remember. Events without coverage fade from collective memory. Events with non-stop coverage become defining moments. Memory itself becomes curated. That story deserves more coverage. At this point, usually people say, yeah, but that story deserves a lot more coverage. People need to know about this. Maybe it did. Do the others not deserve it too? Or do we only mourn the tragedies that fit the narrative, drive engagement, or arrive at the right moment? Because silence is also a message. Why this matters more than you think. When attention is selective, outrage becomes selective. Empathy becomes selective. Policy responds selective. You see where I'm going with this, you guys? And eventually, people stop reacting to reality and start reacting to coverage. And that's when the media stops being a mirror. It becomes a freaking steering wheel. Jesus, take the wheel. Okay. Media, take the wheel. Now that you understand how coverage itself creates importance, the next layer of the iceberg gets even messier.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because it's not about what is covered. It's about how it's framed. Wording is everything. Same footage, same facts, completely different emotions. That's where we go next, framing. And once you see it, every single flippin' headline sounds suspicious. They choose what you feel. Same event, different reality. And I know for a fact, all you guys are seeing this right now. All of you. I'm not gonna preference what this is about. I don't even have to. But we're all seeing this. Here's where it gets a little sneaky. Sneaky-diggy. Sneaky-deaky. The media doesn't even need to change the facts anymore. It just changes the frame. Same event, same footage, same freaking outcome. Completely different emotional experience. This is the part where people swear, no, this won't work on me. Buddy, sorry to break it to you, but it works on everybody. What framing actually means headlines. Framing is how a story is presented to you before you even have a time to think. It's usually the headline, the first sentence, the photo they choose, and the words they repeat. Before your brain asks, what happened? And once emotions lock in, logic has an uphill battle. Headlines aren't summaries. They are instructions on how you should feel. They tell you who the hero is, who the villain is, whether you should be angry, relieved, or sad. For example, one outlet says, officer involved in fatal shooting. Another said, unarmed man killed by the police. Same event, totally different emotional command. One sounds neutral, one sounds absolutely horrific. Off the bat, you're already like, what the Neither is lying, but one is pushing you. Watch the verbs, you guys. Someone is killed, shot, neutralized, lost their lives, was involved in an incident. Those are not interchangeable. They soften, they sharpen, they redirect the blame. Another framing trick. Who gets humanized? Some stories give you childhood photos, family interviews, smiling portraits. Others give you mugshots, blurred CCTV footage, a label, whatever. Suspect, individual, person of interest. Once someone becomes a label, your empathy just shuts off and you don't even notice it's happening. Ever notice how fast experts show up? Before you even understand what's happening, there's already this panel explaining, why is this alarming? Why is this dangerous? Why is this going to confirm your worst fears? The experts aren't there to explain facts. They're there to lock in those emotions. Once the emotional tone is set, the rest of the coverage follows it. It's not just words, you guys. It's visuals. Dark color grading equals danger. Slow zoom equals seriousness. Ominous music equals fear. You're watching a produced experience, and your nervous system responds to it before your brain can even clock in. I'm sure you guys have seen those videos recently of those people filming their normal day-to-day things and editing it like it's a murder mystery or it's a reality show or whatever. This is along the same lines. It introduces emotions that aren't even necessary in what is going on in the visual. This is why debates feel impossible now. Two people can watch the same event, same exact event, and walk away with two completely different emotional truths. Not because one is evil, not because one is stupid, but because they were framed into different reaction before the conversation even started. At this point, you're not arguing facts. You're arguing feelings. And feelings don't concede. Once framing happens, everything else after it is downstream. What policies feel necessary? What reactions feel reasonable? Who feels dangerous? Who feels protected? Framing doesn't just shape opinions. It shapes behavior. And this is the key thing why people are cutting off family, friends. They're getting divorces. They're doing the craziest shit because somebody doesn't agree with the way that they saw something. Wild. And this is how we're programmed. This works because it's subtle. It's not in your effing face. There's no order, there's no command, there's no force, just suggestion. And suggestion feels like free will. Okay. Now that you understand how framing controls emotion, the next layer of the iceberg explains something you probably also noticed. Movements. How they suddenly appear everywhere. How they feel massive and unstoppable. And then how they quickly just vanish. That's not organic. And in this section, we're going to talk about how the media builds movements and just abandons them. Bye-bye. The second they're no longer useful. Movements are built, boosted, and dropped. Attention is the fuel, the media is the match. Have you ever noticed that movements just appear overnight? One day you've barely heard of anything, the next day it's literally everywhere. Your feed, the news, corporate freaking logos. Suddenly brands that sell toothpaste all of a sudden have a fucking opinion. It feels organic. It feels like grassroots. It feels like the people have spoken. And sure, sometimes it does start that way. But what makes a movement explode isn't passion, you guys. It's media coverage. Movements don't live or die on truth. They live or die on attention alone. When it's constant, people join, people share, people feel morally activated. When it slows, interest fades, unity cracks, momentum collapses. The movement didn't fail. It just stopped being fed. The BLM arc. And again, you guys, again, just hearing that, people are like, oh, she's about to piss me the fudge off. Just hear me the fuck out, okay? A perfect example of this is the BLM movement. At its peak, wall-to-wall coverage, nonstop moral urgency. Anyone questioning anything was treated like a monster. How dare you question this movement? Corporations joined in, celebrities joined in, entire cities joined. It felt literally unstoppable. But here's the part nobody likes to talk about. The second things got complicated, the second questions started popping up, the second it stopped being a clean moral story, the coverage shifted. Not overnight, slowly, less airtime, fewer headlines, less urgency. Until one day, people just woke up and realized, wait, what happened to that thing that was supposed to change everything? Movements are easy to sell at the beginning. There's a clear villain, there's a clear victim, and a clear emotional response, a clear motive. But long-term change is messy. It involves policy, disagreements, nuisance, trade-offs. And nuisance is terrible for engagement. So when a movement stops being emotionally simple, the media slowly starts to back up. I want no part of this. Not because it doesn't matter anymore, but because it's not profitable anymore. When the media leaves, the crowd turns. Probably because they're all paid for it, but whatever. Here's the brutal part. When the media stops amplifying a movement, the public doesn't usually say, hey, we should finish this. They say, guess that wasn't that important after all. Attention trains importance. Silence trains forgetting. And once forgetting kicks in, whatever problem the movement was pointing to doesn't just disappear. They just stop being talked about. People stop trusting movements. People stop believing change is real. People stop caring. Because every time something feels massive and urgent, it eventually collapses into nothing. That doesn't make people apathetic on purpose. It trains them to be apathetic. Here's the part that really messes with your head. The media doesn't need to destroy movements. It really doesn't. It just needs to leave. Once the spotlight turns off, the crowd just dispenses on its own. Just turns off. All right, goodbye, let's pack it up. Nobody cares anymore, so why should I? That's not activism. That's an attention economy. If your movement requires constant headlines, constant outrage, constant viral moments, it's not a movement, it's a trend, and trends always die. Now that you understand and you see how movements are created and destroyed, the next layer of the iceberg is something I know, again, you guys have definitely noticed. You're just not caring. Viral outrage.
Why one clip can ruin someone's life. Why everyone screams. Why nothing ever changes. And why tomorrow will be a brand new villain.
That's not justice. That's content. And that's where we're going next. Viral rage is disposable. Meet the villain of the day. Every morning, somewhere on the internet, a wheel spins. And wherever it lands, congratulations. That's today's villain. A random person, a blurry clip, a 15-second video wildly taken out of context. By lunchtime, everybody hates them. By dinner time, they're unemployed. By tomorrow, nobody even remembers their name. Justice. Let's be honest about something uncomfortable. Outrage feels good. It feels good. It feels productive. It feels righteous. It feels like you're doing something. You don't have to research. You don't have to think. You don't have to risk even being wrong. You just have to point and scream with everyone else. Your brain goes, ah, yes, morality, dopamine. Most viral outrage starts with a clip. Not the full story, not the before, not the after. Just the most explosive 5 to 15 seconds. Enough to trigger emotion, not enough to explain anything. Context ruins outrage, you guys. So context gets cut. And once that clip is out there, it doesn't matter what the full story is anymore. The internet already decided how to feel about it. Facts? Michael J. Facts? Out the door. I don't give a fuck. I don't care about facts. I already know what I know. I don't care about anything else. Why every incident looks like a moral test. Viral outrage turns everything into a pop quiz. If you don't react fast enough, suspicious. If you ask questions, suspicious. If you say, I don't know yet, congratulations, you're the villain now too. Nuisance is treated like betrayal, and thinking is siding with the enemy. Here's the rule. You get about 24 hours of rage. That's it. After that, a new clip drops, a new villain appears, the crowd migrates. No follow-up, no accountability, no resolution. Just emotional whiplash. And if the person was actually innocent, oops, hoopsie daisy, I made a mistake. I don't really care. That correction will get about 4 likes. Viral outrage doesn't fix systems, doesn't change policy, doesn't create reform. It doesn't prevent future harm. It doesn't fix anything. It just gives people a place to dump their anger and feel morally clean afterward. It's not justice, you guys. It's emotional recycling. The media loves this. It's cheap, fast, emotional, endlessly renewable. No investigation required, no expertise required, just reaction. The media doesn't have to solve anything. It just has to keep the crowd fed. The scariest part isn't that this happens. It's that people start expecting it. They wait for the next villain. They freaking crave for the next outrage. They feel bored when there isn't one. It's entertainment, baby. This is entertainment, baby. If the internet solved problems as fast as it destroyed strangers, we'd live in a utopia. But instead, we live in a place where nothing gets fixed, everyone is mad, and tomorrow we'll do it all again. Progress. The next layer of the iceberg is something you've definitely noticed as well. Certain people don't just get criticized. They get turned into characters. Heroes, villains, clowns, crazy people. And once someone becomes a character, reality doesn't matter anymore. Strap in. This is gonna be good. People become characters. When humans turn into content, reality stops mattering. Welcome to the casting call. We're here all week. Somewhere along the way, the media stopped covering people and started creating characters. You're not watching a person anymore. You're watching a role. Hero, villain, lunatic, martyr. Once the role is assigned, everything they do gets filtered through it. At that point, facts don't really matter anymore. Nearly as much as vibes. We're going on vibes. Characters are easier than humans. Humans are complicated. Characters are simple. Characters fit into headlines. Characters drive clicks. Characters are easy to love and hate. And most importantly, characters don't require nuisance. Nuisance slows things down. Nuisance makes people hesitant. Nuisance kills engagement. We hate nuisance killing engagement. We hate anything killing engagement, right? So the media doesn't ask, is this person complicated? It asks, what role do they play in today's story? Once you're cast, you're stuck. Here's the part people don't realize. Once someone is cast as a character, they almost never escape it. If you're the villain and you do something good, okay, ignored. If you're the hero and you do something bad, it's reframed. No way you're coming out bad. Everything is predictable. Everything becomes predictable. Not because the person is predictable, but because the coverage is. Once someone realizes they're being treated like a character, they start playing into it. Because attention rewards escalation. Calm statements don't trend. Measured takes don't go viral. Walking things back don't get clicks. probably like this video. It's probably not going to get a lot of engagement, I'm going to be honest. So people go louder, sharper, more extreme. Not because they're stupid, because the system trains them to do it. There's a special role that the media loves more than any other. The crazy person. Once someone is labeled crazy, you don't have to engage in their ideas anymore. You just point and laugh, or panic, or mock. And here's the thing that nobody likes to admit. Sometimes people do start acting unhinged. But you have to ask, did they start that way? Or did the coverage reward it until they became that way? A clear example of this dynamic is Candace Owens. Depending on where you watch, she's framed as a dangerous extremist, a serious political voice, a grifter, or completely insane. Same person, same words, totally different character. And once someone is locked in that role, every appearance reinforces it. Outrage creates clicks, clicks reward escalation, escalation creates more outrage. Loop complete. This is why conversations feel impossible now. People aren't discussing ideas, they're defending characters. You're not saying, I agree with this argument. You're saying, I'm on this team. And once identity gets involved, logic taps out. Attacking the idea feels like attacking the person. Attacking the person feels like attacking self. Congratulations, you're no longer thinking. The media doesn't care who wins. The media doesn't actually care if the hero succeeds, if they excel and win, or the villain fails. It just needs the conflict to continue. Resolutions end stories. Characters keep them alive. If your entire understanding of a public figure can be boiled down to one adjective, you're not informed. You're binge watching a character. Now that you understand how people become characters, the next layer of the iceberg explains something even stranger. Some characters are too dangerous to platform until suddenly they're everywhere. Outrage, bans, warnings, followed by podcasts, interviews, reaction videos. That's not a contradiction. That's marketing. Extremism by proximity. How too dangerous to platform becomes free advertising. The paradox. Let me ask you something. If someone is truly too dangerous to platform, why do they keep popping up everywhere? Warnings, labels, think pieces. We shouldn't give this person attention. And then the podcasts, the interviews, the clips, the reaction videos. That's not an accident. That's a rollout. Don't platform them sounds reasonable, right? In practice, it creates curiosity. The moment you tell somebody, you're not supposed to hear this, half the audience says, oh, well, now I have to hear it. What do you mean? Outrage doesn't shrink audiences. It concentrates them. Here's the trick. You don't have to endorse someone to normalize them. You just have to put them near legitimacy. A mainstream studio, a big podcast, a recognizable host. Once that happens, the viewer goes, well, if they're here, they must have something worth hearing, right? That's proximity, and it works terrifyingly well. A very clear example, a clean example of this is Nick Fuentes. Depending on the outlet, he's framed as the following: an extremist, a dangerous figure, or someone people should be aware of. He's banned in some places and invited into others, condemned loudly, and then quietly given massive platforms. Not because everyone secretly agrees with him, but because controversy is content, you guys. Outrage works better than advertising. You don't have to convince anyone to like anybody. You just have to convince them to look. Hate watching still pays. Rage sharing still spreads. Warning labels still drive clicks. It just needs to circulate personalities. This creates cognitive whiplash. People say, why are they giving these people a platform? While simultaneously watching, sharing, reacting, attention and condemnation get treated like opposites. They're not. They're both fuel. The band that makes you famous. Getting banned used to mean disappointing. Now it's a badge. It signals, this person is dangerous. This person is forbidden. This person needs to be silenced. Which, in the internet game, this is a strategy. Nothing builds an audience faster than feeling prosecuted. The cycle doesn't stop extremism. It hardens it. Supporters feel validated. Critics feel outraged. Everyone feels emotionally charged. And the algorithm smiles. Nobody gets persuaded. Everyone gets louder. If your plan to stop bad ideas is to scream about them, clip them, post them everywhere, congratulations, you guys. You're the marketing department. Now that you see how controversy itself becomes currency, the next layer of the iceberg explains something else. Some stories never seem to end. Years go by. Headlines keep coming. Promise of new developments never stop. That's not because the truth is unfolding slowly. It's because permanent investigation is one of the best distraction tools ever invented. That's where we're going next. Stories that never end. Permanent investigations, infinite distraction. The promise of soon. New details coming soon. Explosive developments expected. This could change everything. Could, my sources say. Soon is the most powerful word in media. It keeps you waiting, it keeps you hopeful, it keeps you watching, and it never has to deliver. These stories are structured like bad TV shows. Let's be honest. No season finale, no resolution, just endless teasers. Every update feels important, but none of them have an actual conclusion. You're not being informed, you guys. You're being sterilized. One of the cleanest patterns of this is the Russian collusion. Years of, this is it. The walls are closing in. Bombshell report. Every article felt like the final chapter. It never was. Still isn't. And here's the important part. This isn't about whether you think it's real or fake. It's about how long it dominated our attention without ever resolving into something we could emotionally finish. You're always an update away from closure. That's not journalism. That's suspense. That's suspense. Investigations are real. They justify endless coverage. Avoid definitive statements. Keep audiences emotionally invested. There's always another angle. There's always another source. There's always another expert. And because the story is never truly finished, it can never be filed away. It just lingers. The psychological effect. Living inside unfinished story does something to your brain. It creates anxiety. It creates suspicion. It creates hypervigilance. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when you live with that long enough, paranoia starts to feel reasonable. You don't trust intuition. You don't trust people. You don't trust silence. Because silence might mean they're hiding something. This is why nothing feels satisfying. Even when a story does end, people feel disappointed. That's it? That's all? Because the emotional buildup was bigger than it could ever be. Permanent anticipation breaks your ability to feel closure. While you're focusing on the endless story, other things start to disappear. Policies pass, decisions get made. Consequences happen off screen. You're staring at the cliffhanger while the rest of the world moves on without you. That's not accidental. Attention is finite. If it's locked in one place, it's not questioning the other. If a story has been about to explode for 3 years, it's not a bomb. Now that you've seen how permanent investigations keep you distracted, the next layer of the iceberg explains something darker. Sometimes attention doesn't just drift. It gets forcefully redirected. And one of the fastest ways to reset public attention is violence. Not fake violence, not staged violence. Violence. Real tragedy. Amplified at the exact moment when something else was supposed to disappear. That's where we're going next. Violence as an attention reset. How tragedy freezes the public and wipes the board. Let's be very clear about one thing. Before anyone spirals, no one is saying that violence is fake. No one is saying that tragedy is staged. No one's saying that people aren't actually suffering. What we're talking about is what happens after. How real tragedy gets used. How attention gets redirected. How everything else disappears the second something horrific happens. The moment everything stops. You know the moment. Something violent happening. Something shocking. Something extremely overwhelming. And instantly, every channel switches. Every headline locks in. Every conversation freezes. The news doesn't just report it. It floods. Wall-to-wall coverage. Replays. Commentary. Panels. Speculation. Nothing else exists. Here's the part nobody tracks. When tragedy dominates coverage, everything else disappears. Not slowly, immediately. Bills, scandals, policy changes, investigations, just gone. You couldn't focus on them even if you tried. Your nervous system is busy, baby. Emotional overload shuts down thinking. Intense emotion narrows over time. Fear, grief, they all do the same thing. They make long-term thinking impossible. You're not asking, what does this connect to? What was happening before this? Who benefits from this attention shift? You're just trying to process the moment. And that's human. That's normal. That's exactly why it works. The same footage forever. You ever notice how the same footage plays over and over again? Same angles, same clips, same stills. Not because there's nothing else to show, but because repetition locks in that emotion. The narrative can move freely. The why now question. This is the question you're never encouraged to ask. Not, did this really happen? But why is this happening now? Why this week? Why this moment? Why this level of saturation? You're not allowed to ask that without being accused of something, which is convenient. Not every violent event gets this treatment. Some dominate the country. Others get a headline, a day, and then silence. The difference isn't always severity. It's the timing. It's the narrative usefulness. It's the emotional potential. Tragedy becomes a spotlight, and spotlights can be aimed when the reset is complete. After enough time passes, the emotional peak fades. Coverage slows down, and the story just kind of slides into the background. When people finally look up, we're on to something new. New rules, new policies, new realities. Most people don't even know. They don't even remember what they were arguing about before. What tragedy they were losing their fucking marbles over a week ago. If you can't remember why the country was furious about 2 weeks ago before a major tragedy, that's not a memory problem. That's a reset. Tragedy doesn't need to be manufactured. It just needs to be amplified. Amp it the fuck up. It overwhelms logic. It suspends skepticism. It makes questioning feel inappropriate. And in that space, anything can happen quietly. Now that you understand how attention can be forcefully redirected, the next layer of the iceberg explains something a little more subtle. Who gets sympathy? Who gets blamed? Who gets humanized? And who gets reduced to a label? Because empathy is never evenly distributed. It's assigned. And once you see how that works, you'll never read another headline the same. How empathy is assigned, not earned. Empathy feels personal. Most people think empathy is automatic. Like, I just feel bad for who I feel bad for. No one wants to believe that compassion is being guided because that feels gross. But here's the uncomfortable truth, you guys. Empathy is one of the most carefully managed resources in media. Some stories introduce you to a person. You get a name, a family, a backstory, a face. Other stories introduce you to a suspect, an individual, a statistic. Same outcome, totally a different emotional response. One invites empathy, the other one quietly blocks it. The first image you see matters more than anything else. Remember that saying, the first impression is everything? This is along those same lines. A smiling photo, your brain opens. A mugshot, your brain closes. Once that emotional door shuts, it almost never fully reopens. And you don't consciously choose that reaction. It just happens. Listen to the words. Someone is a father, a mother, a student, a community member, someone else, a suspect, a known individual, a person with a criminal history. Those aren't neutral descriptions. They tell you very quietly that one life matters more than the other. There's cases where empathy is intentionally limited. The story is framed in a way that kind of makes you think, yeah, but they had a record. Yeah, but they were involved in something. Yeah, but they weren't perfect. That hesitation is the goal, because empathy leads to questions. Questions lead to accountability. We don't want that. Who gets infinite sympathy? Some people and groups get endless empathy. Mistakes are explained, context is provided, doubt is encouraged. Others get one shot, and once public empathy is turned off, nothing else matters. Evidence doesn't matter, nuisance doesn't matter, correction doesn't matter. The emotional verdict is already in. Done. Kaput. Dunzo. Empathy isn't just about feelings, you guys. It shapes public opinion, policy support. When empathy is uneven, justice is uneven. Not because people are evil, but because people are steered. If you feel deeply about one tragedy and not about another, that doesn't make you heartless. It means someone chose which emotion you're supposed to feel. This works because it doesn't feel like control. It feels like compassion. And nobody wants to question compassion. That's what makes it so powerful, you guys. Now that you understand that empathy is assigned, this next layer of the iceberg kind of just ties everything together. And I hope you're still here. Because at some point, this stops being news. It stops being about coverage. It stops being about mistakes. It becomes about control. Not censorship, not force. Something much quieter. Permission. Who's allowed to speak? Who's allowed to spread this? And whose voice quietly disappears? That's the bottom of the iceberg. Control without censorship. Permission, silence, and illusion of free speech. This isn't about banning. When people hear control, they immediately think censorship, bans, dictators, people being dragged off stage. That's not how this works anymore. Modern control doesn't look like force. It looks like permission. You're allowed to speak. Technically, you can say anything in the United States. You can post, you can comment, you can scream in the void. But here's the trick. Speaking is not the same thing as being heard. Reach is power, and reach is curated. Some ideas spread instantly. Some just die. No warning, no explanation, no violation notice. They don't get banned, they just don't go anywhere. The silence feels natural, which is exactly why it works. Algorithms decide what people get boosted, what people get buried, what people are talking about. Not based on truth, based on engagement, emotional reaction, advertiser comfort, and platform risk. If something causes chaos and profit, you got the green light. If something causes thought, but not outrage, you gotta go. You got the red light. Absolutely not. The system doesn't tell you. You're not allowed to say that. It says you can say that, but nobody's gonna hear you. Go on, say it. And because there's no confrontation, no moment of resistance, there's no obvious villain. People don't push back. They adapt. Self-censorship is the goal. After a while, people stop saying things. Not because they were told to, but because they learned it's not going to go anywhere. It'll get misunderstood. It might cost them something. The most effective control system is the ones who police themselves. Outright censorship creates resistance. They don't want that. Quiet suppression creates compliance. People don't feel oppressed. They feel ignored. And ignored people don't revolt. This is why outrage spreads, nuisance dies, extremes dominate, and calm voices disappear. It's not a conspiracy. It's incentives. It's incentives. Emotion spreads. Thoughts stalls. And the system hums along quietly. They love this. If you've ever said, why is nobody talking about this? The answer usually isn't, they don't care. It is because they're not allowed to notice it. The question isn't, can I say this? The real question is, will this be allowed to spread? Because freedom without reach is just noise. So let's zoom out real quick, okay? The 24-hour news cycle keeps you emotionally activated. Selective coverage decides what matters. Framing decides how you feel. Moments rise and fall on attention. Viral outrage keeps you busy. Characters replace humans. Extremes get amplified. Stories never end. Tragedy resets the board. Empathy gets assigned. And permission decides what survives. None of this requires lying. It just requires steering. The media doesn't control you because you're stupid. It controls you because you're human. Emotional, pattern-seeking, social, wanting to be accepted. The moment you stop asking, is this true? And start asking, why do they want me to feel emotional about this right now? You've already become harder to control. Thank you, Danny.